Okay, so here we are. Welcome, hello, and welcome to this Women's Informal Network seminar on the power of saying no and the power of turning tragedies into remedies. So we will hear from Margarita Astrálaga and Silja Flury, who are here with us today. Thank you so much for joining. I am Maria Magdalena Heinrich, and I am one of the coordinators of the Women's Informal Network. And this event is part of our series called Career and Life Development Workshops. And in the context of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, today I have the great pleasure to welcome my co-authors, Margarita Astrálaga and Silja Flury, who will share their own experiences and tips, respectively, on sexual harassment at the workplace and child abuse that are featured in the book You Matter, How Women Reclaiming Their Power Are Changing the World. This book was published 1 year ago on 12 November 2021, and it is a collection of 20 chapters of 20 women leaders from across the world. And today I have also the pleasure of seeing here Wadzanai Garve, who is another co-author, and also Taco Ndiaye, who is also another co-author. So today we want to tackle these two topics, and they're very delicate, of course. And we have had the pleasure and honor and to receive the guidance with regards to writing our chapter of Sylvia Becker-Hill. She's a women's empowerment coach, and she helped us to overcome our fear of sharing our very intimate stories in the book. She sort of coordinated our effort to make the book a coherent piece of work. And so today we will hear a bit more from the experiences specifically of Margarita and Silja. Margarita was born in Colombia and has worked more than 40 years with government agencies, NGOs, and international organizations. She has lived in many countries such as Denmark, Scotland, Kenya, Switzerland, Spain, Panama, and also in Italy. And now she spends her time between the south of Portugal and the south of Spain and Switzerland with her husband. She loves traveling, meeting new people, and learning about other cultures. And her mission in life is to contribute to inclusive and better development, providing fairer opportunities to women especially and youth in the developing world. And after a long international career, she is happy to finally be able to spend more time with her grandkids and to be able to reconnect with family and many friends around the world that she hasn't seen or talked to because of the long working hours for the last decades. And in fact, also she mentioned some of her experiences in her chapter in the book. So while she works as an independent consultant and supports several pro bono institutions, such as the Climate Smart Agriculture Youth Network, and she's also a member of the Advisory Board of Hera, the Light of Women. And she's also one of our mentors in our mentoring and coaching program of the Women's Informal Network. So welcome on board, Margarita. Thanks for being with us. And then we have Silja Flury. Silja is a passionate coach for women, and she's specializing in dismantling the paradigms of women that have with the word power. No? In fact, all our chapters are called The Power of. And this was a choice that we made because we wanted to change this view of the power being something negative. We believe power is positive. And so she's working on that. And she's passionate when it comes to equality in all its aspects of life. Her female clients are discovering their inner light. They learn about their own self-sabotaging patterns that the patriarchy has pushed onto them and learn how to release them in order to reclaim their power. She has a master's degree in coaching and supervision, and having written her thesis about the paradigm of women and power. So she's a specialist in this, and she worked in management positions in the IT and communication industry for over 15 years before finding her true passion as a coach for women. Silja grew up in Basel, Switzerland, in a family of 6 children. And she is married to a wonderful man who's a true gender champion, with whom she and her 2 cats, surrounded by a small flowery garden, now lives in central Switzerland. Now, I would like to hand over to Margarita for introducing her sort of topic, which is sexual harassment on the workplace. We are hearing a lot of statistics and news, and every day in the newspapers, we hear about new cases being brought forward or men being sued. And sometimes the outcome is not as we would like to wish to see. But also there is a lot that we can do ourselves. And so, Margarita, we are very happy that you would like to share with us your experience. You have a long-standing experience, but you also have a very concrete experience with sexual harassment. So how was it for you, and what tips could you share with all of us? Thank you. Over to you, Margarita.
Thanks, Marilena, and it's really great to be here with all of you today. And yes, when Marilena asked me, I thought I would like to share with other women, particularly members of the WIN network, a part of my life that it was very difficult to write about, because it's, I think it's a very deep issue that you normally don't talk about much or very little. So as Marilena said, I was born in Colombia, and I grew up with these silly theories that apply in many cultures, that to be feminine is to be kind and gentle, to respect our elders, and to be sure that to be loved by mommy and daddy, I am always ready to say, yes, mommy, yes, daddy, and even to our aunties and our uncles. So the problem is when you finally turn an adult, that you have not been trained ever to say no, to really explain what your preferences are regarding different issues. So as I share in my chapter, the first time I said no, it was to my loved ones. And it was very difficult. So imagine how difficult it was for me to say no to my boss. So, but I think that part of our problem in the international setting is that we are very vulnerable. And I'm going to talk here about women because it's my experience. But of course, we know that sexual harassment happens to all sorts of people, not just women. And maybe I'll touch a little bit on that later on if we have time. But when we arrive in these international settings, we are very vulnerable to predators because we are out of our comfort zone. We move around countries. Sometimes our marriages and partnerships do not survive the stress and the traveling. And obviously, loneliness is many times our companion. So those predators are very smart, and they know that we feel lonely. So I think some of them really abuse our situation. Some of my first short sexual harassment experience were with high-level officials. And I think that they use the power they have in their own institutions and in their own countries to push these international female professionals to try to impose on them the obligation to accept whatever they want us to do. So it's a very sensitive issue, and I would like to have time later on to discuss that, because we have this duty to member states. So what shall we do? What are the ideas? What are the ways forward if a member state representative tries to harass us either verbally or physically or otherwise? So, but in my chapter, my case on sexual harassment it is about my supervisor, somebody who had been appointed thanks to the political pressure of his government and the financial contributions of his government, therefore had a very high standing in the institution because of that. So he started first by flirting, which now we call it verbal harassment, by mentioning how beautiful my yellow dress was, or how beautiful I look in blue, or how green suit my eyes. So, but the most difficult problem was when we were on mission together, because he invited me to his suite, which had a spectacular view to the center of town. And he said we could order room service and taste a vintage wine that he had bought for the occasion. It sounds really tempting, no? But of course, after he had been flirting with me for all this time, I said, I'm sorry, I have other commitments. No, I cannot make it. But unfortunately, there was a very long week. And he sort of invited me every day. By the end of the week, he was furious and asking me why I didn't like him. And I was trying to be nice, I suppose. And I said, well, you know, I don't like to be around married men. That is out of the question for me. But then, without any hesitation whatsoever, he said he would give me an F in my performance assessment if I didn't go to bed with him. So I don't know if any of you have suffered this bad harassment, but it was really scary for me. When I returned to my duty station the day after he threatened me this way, I didn't know who to talk to or what my rights were. And I felt more alone than I ever did. So I went to the head of cabinet of my organization, who I thought was a friend, because his son was going to school with my son. So I thought, okay, maybe he can help. And he told me there is nothing we can do. And he gave me some reasons that are in the book why the organization couldn't do anything. And he said the best way forward is to move divisions, move out of the problem, more or less. So in the end, my boss had a very young wife. He liked them young. And at that time, I was quite young. So I threatened him to go to his wife and tell him what was happening. So he stopped harassing me. But the environment, the working environment was really dreadful. It was very difficult for me. Of course, I had no respect whatsoever left for him. And in the end, I changed division as it was recommended and moved to another duty station. But one of the questions I have is, why is it that the victim is the one that has to move divisions? Why isn't the one who is the harasser, the attacker, the one who has to look for another job, but it's always the victim that is highly recommended to move? So as Maria Elena was saying, on the one hand, I say, thank God things have changed so much since this happened to me. And we have so many rules and policies in place preventing this sexual harassment in the workplace. But it continues to happen. And I think women don't feel secure enough to raise their voice and stop the harassment. I was reading a little brochure from ILO talking about sexual harassment in the workplace. And they were saying that it's in many countries still women between 18 and 60, about 50% are, in some cases more than 50%, sometimes almost 60% are reporting sexual harassment at one point in their careers. So why is this still happening? And I think partly because we are scared to raise our voices and to raise the issues. So during my career and after I had to face all these issues, I tried to help other colleagues, younger colleagues, And some were really scared of losing their jobs. And that's why they didn't want to bring this forward. The others who wanted to bring this forward, we had serious problems because they wanted proof. And whose word is more important, the supervisor or the staff that maybe doesn't like the supervisor? So one of the tips I have on that area is keep a diary with details on date, location, people that were present, type of harassment, because if not, it's very difficult then to say this happened. So it's important to have that and to remember that sexual harassment is not necessarily what my boss did to me at the end, just to threaten me to, if I didn't go to bed with him, to fail me in my assessment or not renew my contract. But it's also the verbal one. So this harassment started when he started talking about my beautiful yellow dress and my blue and the green and how they fit my eyes. The other problem is that you prove there is harassment, but then you have to prove it's unwelcome. And you know, one of my harassers told me once that I was smiling all the time, and therefore that meant that I wanted that. So some of the tips I have after that experience is that it's important to tell immediately a colleague you really trust and tell in confidence, so that if you need a witness tomorrow, you have somebody you told this happened just 5 minutes ago. If it's a coworker harassing you, try to talk to your supervisor if you trust your supervisor. If it's your supervisor harassing you, go to the top of the supervisor. And if you don't trust any of those, go to the ethics office or the ombudsperson and submit a complaint in writing. And don't let it pass, because it's your right to decide who you go out with, who you accept nice comments. I know that for us from Latin America, it's difficult because men are used to always saying, oh, how beautiful you look today. And so it's always difficult to know from the cultural aspect which person is trying to harass you and which one is just making a joke that they will tell to every woman they see. And somebody who is really targeting you. And also, I talk to this person who is harassing you and threaten this person clearly, in very clear terms, to report them. So this is my story that it really hurts. I still remember my nightmares of thinking I have to go back to work tomorrow and face this man at the staff meeting again. So it's not good, but I think it's important to really speak up now that you have the chance to speak up and to follow the process so that these things stop happening and your children and my grandchildren will not have to face again harassment in the workplace. So thank you, Mary. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Margarita, for sharing your experience and also, I think, some very concrete tips of how we can go about it. In fact, in FAO, we have a real campaign against sexual harassment, and we have a whistleblower policy that supports especially women, but everyone who comes forward and speaks up against harassment or also abuse of power. We have heard from you that you have been threatened. So we do have an ombudswoman who is very good and an ethics officer. Their eyes are and ears especially are open to hear your stories. And it is important to report, like Margarita was saying. So I think your suggestion of keeping a diary with the date and the location and the people who were present can help you yourself to identify, to say, is this really harassment? Am I exaggerating, or is it not okay? And then also, because at a certain point, if you are reporting, you will have to show evidence. And if this becomes a case, the more evidence you can bring, the better. In FAO especially, there is the possibility to then be moved elsewhere, like you were saying, Margarita. But is it correct that you would have to be moved? Probably not. But in order to protect you while the investigation is ongoing, that is a sort of interim solution. But I agree with you, Margarita, that probably we should look into this also with policymakers, that probably the person under investigation should be removed for the time being and not the person reporting. So thank you very much. And we will first hear from, okay, I see Erin, you have your hand up. Okay, I'll give you the floor and then we move over to Silja. Erin.
Yeah, thank you very much, Magdalena, and Margarita, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's very courageous and inspiring, and I'm sorry that you went through that, but I think your example is, I mean, the way you handled it, and also your example is an inspiration to all of us. I just wanted to add from my own experience, as you said, this is still going on. Unfortunately, I had to learn a lot about this in a previous job, previous life, not for my own experience, but to support 2 different colleagues who had been sexually assaulted. So, and the first one who confided in me, I couldn't believe it. And even now it makes me emotional because I remember it's one of those moments that's frozen in your brain, like when your president dies, for example. I remember where we were walking down the street and she told me, and I was just absolutely blown away. And she said, she was much younger than I am. And she said, I'm nobody, and you know, I'm not even staff. I'm a consult. I don't even work for the UN anymore. And you know, this is the senior guy. And I was like, just overcome emotion. I was like, no. I said, I work with a lot of strong female managers, could be male managers as well. They can be champions. I don't believe that if people knew, they wouldn't care. So I started this journey of, as you said, going first to my chief, then the ethics, then the ombudsman, ombudsperson, staff council, office of staff legal assistance, etc. The process took years, but those 2 different individuals are now gone from that particular agency. Both cases were reopened. One of the cases, other case had been closed, kind of no explanation, sorry, case closed, insufficient evidence, was reopened. The other case, my colleague contacted me just a couple of weeks ago to give me an update. And I had started to speak, not just myself, but others speaking out about this, saying sexual harassment and assault is going on. What can we do? Where can people go? If it were me, I think I would have not known where to begin. Probably kept it to myself, you know, who knows? It was much easier to advocate on behalf of others, you know. So I think there has been and is progress within the UN system on these. We're not there yet by any stretch of the imagination, but it's, I think people like you telling your story, having the courage, having the, you know, compassion to tell your story, and all of us on the call and otherwise, because if it's me, maybe I don't want to go to ethics, but I might come to you, Margaret, or someone I know from WIN or a trusted colleague or whatever. And then, you know, we can start to explore so I think it's just so important for people to know they're not alone. It's not a lost cause. My colleague who updated me a couple of weeks ago said, because of my testimony, which I felt, I was surprised I didn't feel as protected as I wanted to by the system, but I thought, this is a risk I have to take. And she said that helped establish credibility in her case and the cases moving forward. So just to say, I think all of us supporting each other, raising our voices on behalf, or, you know, being a listening ear, talking about what resources are available, we really are making progress, and we hopefully will continue to do more. So again, I just thank you so much for your courage and your inspiration. Thank you. And Marilena for organizing this event as well.
Thank you, Erin, for sharing your concrete, hands-on and recent experience. On one side, I agree with you that it is easier to advocate for others. On the other side, it is also more difficult because when you're coming to the ethics officer, to the ombudsman, they need to have very concrete experiences. And so if you're not completely into the story, it also can have some risks not to report on behalf of others. But I do believe that, yes, it is our responsibility of all of us to support each other. And so in that sense, I really hope that you can see the Women's Informal Network as a source, as a safe space where you can reach out to any of us who are here. For example, Margarita, who has gone through it, or Erin, I'm sure you would be available for others who face a similar situation to say, okay, I did it that way. What was good? What was bad? And so you can help others to help other women who may not know where to go, as you were saying. So thank you so much, Erin. And that is really the purpose of this session, now to share experiences, to get some tips about how to overcome situations. And this leads me actually to Silja, who had a very difficult experience in her life when she was very young. And she learned how to overcome this. And so her chapter, The Power of Transforming Tragedies into Remedies, is something very positive. So something very positive that can come out of something really that in theory could also ruin you for your life. So Silja, I would like to hand over to you directly. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. I would like to first, all of you, take a deep breath. And because I'm very emotionally with Margarita, because I know her story very well. She was my writing sister. So I would like you to take a deep breath and just let those emotions for a moment, just for a moment, because they have to stay with you, because they are important. This anger that comes up when you hear those stories, this frustration that comes up, just let them go. And concentrate again on your heart. Where is your heart? Your heart's always at the right place. It knows where to go. So, yeah. I have a totally different, of course, I have experienced harassment at the workplace as well, very openly in open space. But today my part is not about these stories I've had to work through, but abuse. I'm not going to share my presentation because we are well in time. But you can check, for example, on the WHO website, just look for violence against children. It is estimated 1 billion children between the age of 2 to 17 have experienced some kind of violence in their life. So 1 billion worldwide. That's an eighth of the whole population. We are 8 billion and 1 billion have experienced any kind of violence against them. And I'm sure some of you in this room have experienced. I have been abused by 3 different people in 3 different life spans, my grandfather, my brother, and a cousin of mine. Yet I forgave them wholeheartedly because I had to. Actually, it was a need to do for me to be able to go on, because what I did until around I was 30 years old, I blamed my life's choices on the abuse happening in my childhood. I blamed myself for the abuse that happened. I was 4 years old the first time, and I blamed myself for being there as a 4-year-old girl, where you don't know what's happening to you. And most probably my grandfather was the first person opened that door for the others to then also take advantage, because the other times I was 8 and 11 years old, and I didn't know that love is not sex. I knew from the experience from my grandfather, who was during the day the most perfect granddad you can imagine. And that night he was the most horrific granddad you can imagine. So I have those 2 pictures have always been in me. I loved him, but I hated him. I loved him, but I hated him. And in general, I started to hate society as is. And what my parents went through dealing with me and with the situation that one of their parents took advantage that their son with 15 years old has abused his sister, who was then 8 and 7 years old. That was really, really difficult. And I still talk with my mom about it. And this book, this chapter I wrote was really, really, I had to have my mom at my side. It was difficult to write because I do not and never want to blame my brother for whatever he did, because it's done, it's okay. And for this, I want to read you one part, just one part of the chapter, so you can maybe feel what I felt in that moment when I sat down with him. The moment when I took him, my brother, into my arms and honestly, full-heartedly forgave him for all that was. It still fills my eyes with loving tears. It was beautiful and so powerful. No hate, rage, or anger was there. The heavy weight of guilt and powerlessness was lifted from my shoulders because of the deep and honest love for this person that filled me. Because of the love I, for the very first time, felt for myself. For my person, for Silja, this was the most important step I took for myself in my life. The weight that had pulled me down for almost 20 years has been lifted from my shoulders. And it made me so angry at the world, the society, and everyone, and also at my body. I didn't treat my body very well as a teenager. I gave it to everyone. Let's say it like this. So because I didn't love myself, I didn't love my body, I didn't appreciate who I am. But at that split of a second, when I took my brother into my arm and wholeheartedly forgave him, that is when I reclaimed my personal power, my power of myself and the power of loving. It was not easy. It took 10 years of therapy, but I had, I think, a very exceptional therapist, but they are there. Those therapists exist. They are there to help you and support you through those stories, through these things. And what she taught me is to see the abuser before the abuse happened, to see the person before he turned into an abuser. That gives you the ability to see a human being and not just the title of abusing. It is not easy. It is something I had worked on very, very long, but for me personally, it was liberation to change the perspective and see that this is a human being and that it deserves, as well as I do, to be forgiven. It doesn't matter if the other person takes the forgiveness. You have to forgive just for yourself. That's so the key learning is by forgiving, and that's most probably the most important. By forgiving, the abuse does not define me. By forgiving, I was able to let go of the hate. And by forgiving, I learned to love, really love. I think that's it. No, one very, very important that I work on daily, and I'm so happy Marilena brought this here into this room, because this here is exactly what needs to happen much more. Talk, speak up, talk about your own experience, share your experience whenever you are ready to do so. Whenever you feel safe enough, whenever you have enough ground to talk about your own experience, talk about it. Talk with your friends, with your family, with colleagues, within these networks that are existing, so many of. Bring the awareness to the society. Orange the World is the, I think, most important to do so, to really talk about victims and to bring those up. And look out for the signs in a friend. Look out for those signs if someone's not taking care of their body, if they hate their body. Signs are scratching, or I don't know how you call it, the cutting. Those are signs that there might have been an abuse, also mentally or physically, it doesn't matter. The signs are the same. look out for them and address them. If you feel safe enough to hold the space for the person, talk to them, open up and create a safe space for your counterpart. And never, ever judge a victim by its today's behavior. We tend to judge a lot. We tend to, oh, look at her, look at this, look at how she dresses. You do not know their story. You do not know where they come from. And with judging, we don't create the safe space we all need to come together and bring awareness. So what I've already read in the chat, yes, speak up, speak about your personal experience, talk, create safe spaces, small circles where you can talk about those things happening in your past, but always remember your opening wounds. Whenever you speak about such a topic, you can trigger someone else's. Be ready for this. And always have like a net holding them up and saying, okay, we are here for you. And if you see someone that gets triggered, take them on a one-on-one after such a discussion, take them on a one-on-one and talk to them and try to really bring them back into a positive, or look for share your therapist's number. I cannot, she retired, but share the networks that are existing, share whistleblower sites, share women, well, in Switzerland, we have the women houses. So I always have this list with me whenever I encounter, and I was like, look, there are people out there who can support you. Yes, the power of empathy. Thank you, Taco. That is about my experience.
Thank you so much, Silja. I think it was really a powerful sharing of your experience, and you're like a light, like a star, like an example really of how to transform something very negative into something that can, you know, be life-changing in terms of loving yourself. I think that is what I take away really, and not judging, but seeing the person before seeing the abuser. I think that can help. Of course, it must be very difficult. In the chat, we have a lot of messages from our participants appreciating Margarita's power and sharing, and also Silja's your sharing of your story. And people are saying, I cannot imagine how devastating it must have been. And thanks for sharing and giving us the tips. And also someone is saying, thanks for sharing. It is because of women who speak up that changes can be made. So yes, we need to speak up more. We need to support each other. And that is the main purpose of the Women's Informal Network. I will not be tired enough to repeat it, that we have to support each other. I would like to open up for any questions that you may have that you want to direct to Margarita about her experience, or to Silja, or also to Erin, or if anyone else would like to share thoughts or experiences or add anything. Please, you can raise your hand and come live into the discussion. Or you can put it in the chat. Erin, would you like to take the floor?
Oh, thanks, Margarita and Silja. Yeah, I'm just astonished. I mean, hard to find the words, but sharing your story and listening to your story and wow, this is possible, like incredible journey, and you know, all the work you did, and to arrive at that place of forgiveness and healing, and this incredible work you're doing with women and to support women's journeys and healing. And it's just amazing to me. I mean, yeah, I'm still reflecting on it all, but like I put in the chat, like, you're an example of what's possible, because some of us might think, oh, if I've been through this or that, or one of my loved ones has been through this or that, you know, that's it, that's going to affect my life forever. And as you said, affect the life choices. But yeah, just to see like your courage and what you made possible, I really appreciate that. And I know you'll inspire many other people. So thank you very much for that.
Okay, we have a lot of messages of colleagues and friends admiring the courage you have to speak up and to share your stories, because it is not easy. And I know that Wadzi amongst us is also one of those champions about speaking up and loving yourself. And I believe, Wadzi, you always have something to share. So I would like to give you the floor now. Wadzi.
Thank you so much, everyone. Excuse me, I have the flu. One of the most, I really want to thank Margarita and Silja, because I think one of the biggest issues is the silence. Silence is what makes abusers able to do what they do. And they silence us in many ways. They silence us as women. Because a woman, you know, we get issues in which they use they define us by one other woman's behavior. So a woman who cries wolf for abuse, they then say, oh, all women did that, you know. So this is what happens when we have movements like like, you know, the movements we've had around sexual harassment. The lack of belief of the women that came forward in high profile cases. I mean, how many women do you need to believe that Weinstein was doing what he did? You know, how many women do you need to believe that, what was the Dr. Huxtable, what was his name? The Black actor, that he was abusing women. It had to be over 50 for someone to finally say, oh yeah, okay, maybe he was, you know, he had Bill Cosby, thank you. Maybe he had settled cases out of court. Yeah, maybe he is. Oh, but he's such a nice guy. No, he isn't. He's an abuser, right? And he's hurt. And hurt people hurt people. So our silence is what keeps abusers in power. Take away that power from an abuser. Out them, shame them, tell the world, you know? And the shame is not on you, the shame is on them, right? But because we are abused, even Margarita is still saying, well, maybe that wasn't, you know, sexual abuse. Yes, it was, you know? It was harassment. It was objectifying your body. It was, you cannot attribute any other word to it except sexual harassment. It was, and abuse of power, right? So these are things that we need to name them and take them on. And as we do our 16 days of activism, one of the things is I just exercise compassion. I loved Celia's message about just not judging a person by their behavior, because you do not know what path they have walked. And so it's so important to exercise compassion with self and compassion with others, but start with yourself. It's taken, Celia, for these two women to write their stories. They needed support. They couldn't do this alone, you know? And for them to tell their stories, you have no idea how hard it is for them to switch on that camera and tell a group of strangers, right, their story. Every single time, it's so hard. And I've read it several times. I've heard the stories, but just hearing them again from Margarita and Silja just reinforced for me how brave and how courageous it is for women to say, I'm not keeping quiet anymore. I'm not allowing you to demean me. I'm not allowing you to live in silence. I'm going to speak up. And one of the most beautiful things that I wanted to thank these two women for is for their love and compassion and forgiveness. It's so hard to say, I forgive. And for Silja, it's her brother, you know? Can you imagine? I mean, just how huge that is. So thank you very much. I just wanted to add that today's AIDS, International AIDS Day. I have lived with HIV for 30 years. So please wear your red ribbons. I'm going to put a link in the chat for anyone who wants to read the stories that I've collated. But yeah, thank you, ladies. Thank you so much for your courage and for your compassion. Thank you.
Thank you, Wadzi, for always being a champion also on various aspects that relate to women and women's stories, and HIV as another pandemic that is not finished. So it's always very important. And again, there we're talking about judgment and stigma that should not be there, right? And so the same is valid for women who have been abused. Very often there is stigma and self-criticism or self-judgment, thinking that it's our own fault, and it is not. So I believe that, yes, I am reading your chapters, Margarita and Silja, is one thing, but hearing it from you directly is a totally different thing. And in fact, we have a comment by Daniela, who is also here with us. And Daniela Milic, she is another coordinator of the Women's Informal Network between New York and Geneva. And she's also one of our co-authors of the You Matter book. And so thank you for joining us, Daniela. Would you like to add anything?
Hello, ladies. And apologies, I have some workers here, so if you hear some noise, it's not intentional. But thank you so much. And what I put in the chat was you ladies giving your stories another breath of air. It's just incredible. It's a lot to take in, and just the courage. I think that's actually what I take away. I mean, courage to live through all of that, but the courage to now transform it and tell your story. And you know, I was told once by one of the persons who went through something similar was, we cannot undo what has been done, but we can change the narrative. We can reframe it. We can love triumphs all in a way. It's a long journey, but I'm really just appreciate and grateful for you sharing this today. And also looking at it in a wider scope, since most of us here representing organizations where we think it's not happening in our neck of the woods, it's happening somewhere far away. It's actually happening a lot more frequently than we think. And in the latest survey that we did, is like 20% of participants said they have experienced it. And we know this is an issue that's really underreported. So if it's 19,000 respondents and 20% of them said that they experienced some form of abuse, it's a lot. So how many do we need? I think this is a huge issue. And I sometimes get really kind of enraged with the fact that we need to prove that something is happening, right? As if like one is not too many, you know? And then what's also interesting to see them, people also reporting that this is happening during their time at work. So what can we do in our workplace to be just sort of more aware of the situations that are happening in that? So I think we have a lot of ways to go to bring the domestic abuse in the issue in the public eye. It's not just something that belongs in a kind of a private sphere, because I think in that sense we're enabling the abusers even more. So I really think that not only just these 16 days, but throughout, when we're working on policies, we're looking at gender empowerment and things like that, I think this really should be in the forefront. And stories like Margarita's and Silja's are really important to help shape the policy, to help change our mindset about that. And I love the fact, that's one thing that I'm taking away the most, is that there's no anger. I heard a lot of compassion in you, even describing something so atrocious. And I think that's your victory. That's your moral victory. And I think that actually gives me joy, gives me inspiration, that no matter what happens, it doesn't happen to us, it happens for us. And I will maybe someday have the courage to tell a story, not of my own, but of my own mother, who's gone through something very traumatic. I don't have even the idea yet to begin to tell that. Especially while a certain person is still alive. I'm probably waiting for universe to take care of certain things before I get that courage. But I think what you ladies are showing, actually, that if you have love and you have self-love and self-compassion, you can overcome anything like that. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. And if you haven't read these stories, I hope that these two ladies have convinced you to pick up a book and read it, and hopefully leave us a review as well, because we will really, really appreciate it. One action you can do for 16 days, let it be this one if you haven't done anything else. Thank you so much. And thanks, Marilena, for putting this together.
Thank you, Daniela. I think what you have said and what you have shared is very important. And I think reconnects very nicely to the title of your chapter, Daniela, which is called The Power of Love. Ultimately, it's all about love. And as Silja was saying, it's loving ourselves, starting with the compassion, as what you said, being compassionate with ourselves. And so before we close, I have seen the hand of Miki and of Taco. So very quickly before we close, Miki, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity of expressing this really deep question that I will raise to Silja. Because finally, the topic was the power of saying no. So given the fact that she transformed this violence into like kind of love and compassionate and forgiveness, so having passed by years, so I would like to understand, like nowadays in the everyday life, how this like ancient violence that is in a sense a reminding of the cells in her body, how today she can say no to everyday violence, which could be like manipulating people, or even people that loves her, but in a certain way cause kind of little violence. So I would like, I don't know, I know it's like a difficult question maybe, but I would like to better understand if this like forgiveness and she can put in place in the everyday life, and how she can put in place the power of saying no with this kind of aptitude and energy that she learned.
Thank you, Miki. Over to you, Silja.
It's a very good question, very good question. And I think, Margarita, the thing is, I believe I have a special gift given to me by birth and by the family I grew up in. I have a general love for human beings. I love human beings, whoever they are, whatever they've done. And then I read a book when I was about 25, 26. I read the book by Conversations with God.
Yeah.
And with this, it is hard to read, because he says you even have to love Hitler. You have to love someone like Trump. You have to love, because they have been made who they are. They have not been born bad. They are children who have had very bad experiences in their life and turned into those psychopaths, which is an illness, which is a mental illness. So to try, that's what I try to see the person before the bad thing happens. I think that is how I walk my daily life today. It doesn't work every day. Let me tell you, I can be pissed off on people. I can be frustrated by people. I can be whatever. But I try to remember at the end of the day what I'm grateful for, and I'm grateful for human beings walking this earth. And I do know women like here in this call are changing the world. Women like you who are listening to us today, to Margarita, to Wazi, to Marilena, to all of us, and share our stories. You are all so powerful. You are also, there is so much love in this room right now that I feel. And also the sisterhood I had with the You Matter. I'm a little bit more outside at this moment because I had to protect my own, of very different reasons, which do not belong in here. This sisterhood we created is forever, is for eternity. And it's enabled not only me, not only Margarita Watsi and all the other authors to write about their stories. It enables our social network besides this. Because when you change yourself, when you step into your power, your surroundings come with you. Your network is coming with you. They see you and change, and the change you are living. And if I just want to live by example, and it doesn't work every time, Michaela, not at all. But I try. And that's all you can do. Try one step at another. And don't take the huge steps. Take teeny tiny steps. Teeny tiny steps that will bring you forward. And I think learning to see the human and to see the baby born. Every baby born is innocent and lovable. That is maybe how I deal every day to forgive. I have one point where I have still a discussion. My mother asking me when I wrote this chapter is, should I have gone with, talk to the police about those family members? Because we didn't. We as a family decided we will not do it. We didn't report the abuse to official things. And she still thinks, because she today thinks everyone has to be reported and has to be made accountable for. I told her no, because we made them accountable on a different way. For example, my granddad was kicked out of his home by my grandmother right away. And my brother suffered his very own story. But maybe it's because he told my parents what happened because he couldn't live with what he'd done. I didn't, because when they found out, that was 8 years later, I was 16. They just thought I'm acting out. And then he came forward and said, no, listen, I have to confess that I have done this. And that might be a reason why my sister has having problems with alcohol, has having problems with drugs and stuff like that. So, and still, I love my brother. It's quirky, but it's true. I just love him, and he deserves my love.
Thank you, Silja. I think really very touching and powerful. I also do believe that your mom has a point, because if your brother, I mean, I'm sure he went through his journey, but sometimes there is the question if perpetrators can do the same harm to other people, to other women, then probably there is the need to report. But you within the family, you will have probably judged and made the right decision for that situation. But in other cases, again, we have to speak up, because it is not only about ourselves. If we speak up, if we go to the ombudswoman or to the ethics officer, it's not because we are just reporting our case. Our case may be the 4th or 5th one that is being reported. And then they're finally opening their eyes to say, oh, okay, yes. Like Wadzi was saying, how many women do have to come forward for a case to be actually filed or an investigation to be started? So don't think in terms, oh, it's just me exaggerating. No, everything needs to be reported, because you can potentially also save someone else, by reporting. And so it is really important. Margarita, I would like to give very quickly the floor to you also, because I believe that the question that Miki raised was also for you about the power of saying no and how you live today with that strength that you basically got through your experience.
Thanks, Marilena. Well, I must say it's not easy. I have to say that I have to remind myself very often, almost on a daily basis, I can say no. And when I manage to say no, I feel very happy. And I struggle a lot even with family issues. When one of my brothers asks me for something really unacceptable, I tend to always say, yes, of course, I'll try my best. And I really try my best. But I know it's difficult, so I should say no. So it's every day to remind myself that you have to say no, and you have to learn to say no, and that gives you happiness, and that makes me feel powerful. Every time I say no, I feel a real important power inside myself. So it's like inner strength, that I have the inner strength to say no when I want to state what my preference is for on everyday basis for many, many aspects of my life. So I think we were not trained for that, and we need to make sure that we do practice, because practice makes perfect. Thank you, Marilena.
Thank you very much, Margarita. It's true, practice makes perfect. And before we close, I would like to very quickly hand over to Taco. You have raised your hand earlier. Taco Njaye is one of our co-authors, and she wrote the chapter called The Power of a Selfless Shiro. And so over to you, Taco.
Thank you, Marilena. And I think every time I hear Silja talk about her story, it takes me time to process it. And Margarita, I've also learned a lot from you today. And I think through your testimonials, you really taught us the power of love, but also the power to reclaim your own power. Because when I see you sitting here feeling your feelings and being so open about what happened, I always wonder, how do you do it? When I was writing my story, I chose to write a different story than mine, because I think I was terrorized of the idea that my supervisor and our chief economist and the ethics officer and all these lines of clearances reading something so personal. So I appreciate that you take it out there to the world, and that you show the vulnerability and everything that comes with it. So I've learned a lot. I started painting quite recently during the COVID, because you know, it was a way to also regain control of my life, because there was so much fear, the loss, the uncertainty, that the only place where I could find certainty was on what happens on the canvas, because that I had full control over that. And I think if you are a survivor of gender-based violence, you also lose that control on what happens to you. So so I use art to also trigger emotional response, because I've been talking about gender violence for over 26 years, and it is still there, it is still prevalent. It is a real pandemic, but that has not been taken care of properly. So I use art to amplify women's voices, but also to trigger emotional response. So I'll stop there. I'm sure that there will be lots more opportunities to share, but I just wanted to commend you for what you shared with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Taco. And thank you also for being so honest about your fears and how you are working on them also, and the beautiful work that you have done through your paintings in raising those issues in a different way than writing, but collecting women's voices and connecting them to your paintings that are really very beautiful and impactful. And Shasha, thank you for your comment in the chat. Yes, I agree. She says, I think we should also push for the internal system process to genuinely prioritize these issues whenever there is a report, and put hard deadline for concluding these requests, because a justice delayed is justice denied. A delay may create the perception that the organization allows for this type of behavior. So whatever we can do in our power to force these things to be reported and for investigations to be started, I believe we have to do it. It is within our own power. And then we have many more comments also and sharing of ILO behaviors. Thank you, Margarita, for expressing specifically what the ILO says that qualifies for sexual harassment in terms of physical, verbal, non-verbal, etc. We also do have to do our own homework to learn what is what should we be reporting and what vocabulary should be we be using when we are going to the ombudswoman or person or the ethics officer. And so with this, I would like to really thank all of you, but especially Margarita and Silja, but all of you for connecting, for sharing your thoughts, and actually for you to create this safe space, because it's all of us. It's not just me or Chitra or Erin or Daniela who are the coordinators, but it is all of us. And so we should really see the people who are here connected and those who will be watching the recording. We are here to support each other. And I think that is very, very important. And just an announcement that I'm very happy to make. Wadzi and I, we have been working hard during this year for the You Matter book to come out as an Italian version. It will have a new title that is called Noi Contiamo. We count, we matter. It's basically the translation. And this Italian version will be launched next Tuesday on 6th December. And it will be through a hybrid event at the university, where the university students translated our 21 chapters. We will have one more chapter in our book. And so I will be sharing the invitation through a calendar invitation for all of you to connect if you like, no matter where you are, because it will be also web streamed. And then we will have the special encounters of some of our authors with the person who translated their chapter. So I believe it will be another very touching and emotional experience. And so I am very much looking forward to that. And I hope that I will also see you there next week. And then we will have another event on 15th of December. That will be an online event. It will be actually a workshop on working on your ego with a coach, Lourdes. We already had her here in Rome for an in-person event, and she will be back and coaching us. And so I believe that will be another very powerful event before we break for the holiday season. So thank you all. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you, Silja and Margarita, and everyone. Please keep up the leading with love always. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.